Can the average person on the street write a great novel? Well, today we are going to hear one of the literary fiction goats, Don DeLillo, answer this question because on this channel before, I have promoted that we need to sit down and revise our novels for 3 or 5,000 hours like Don DeLillo did, or many of the other greats did. That if we want to create a literary renaissance, we need to stop releasing so many books, stop saturating the market with so much crap, and really focus on creating masterpieces. But the novel is such a weird medium because outliers can come in and just dominate it or do a really good job with it. And my name is Ian, and here on Right Conscious, we cover Don DeLillo. If you look at the playlist down below, you will see an ever blossoming library of videos on DeLillo's books, his life, and his writing philosophy. And so, you are not here for me, you are here for DeLillo. So let us now hear from him. Do you know why I believe in the novel? It's a democratic shout. Anybody can write a great novel. One great novel, almost any amateur off the street. I believe this, George. Some nameless drudge, some desperado with barely a nurtured dream can sit down and find his voice and luck out and do it. Something so angelic it makes your jaw hang open. The spray of talent, the spray of ideas. One thing unlike another, one voice unlike the next. Ambiguities, contradictions, whispers, hints, and this is what you want to destroy. And so I am a high school teacher and I am in the trenches right now. I have seen the decline of students over the past 6 or 7 years in a radical way. And sometimes I get on here and I'm like, oh my God, public education is doomed. But one of the interesting things that public education has done for society, especially Western society, is create a semi literate or post literate, whatever we want to call them, group of individuals. And occasionally, out there in this sea of post literate individuals, someone rises up and says, I'm going to write a novel out of nowhere, or decides to become a writer at like age 30, whatever, like Haruki Murakami did, and they find a massive amount of success. And it's easy in our deconstruct and destroy lit bro mindset to compare everyone to the best. You know, if they're not Cormac McCarthy or Pinch On, then they're not good. They're just a hack. But first and foremost, writing is about cultivating a unique vision inside of you. And if you are a unique individual that sees the world differently or has lived a very unique life, then you are the perfect person to write a novel because the novel is the greatest medium for artistic expression in the modern world because there are no producers screwing you over. There are no actors and actresses or any other strings you need to pull. You don't have to get together with a band. You are using words over that are going to span over 100,000 words and have access to the interiority of characters' emotions and thoughts to get across a message. An album cannot do that. An album also, most of the time, unless we're dealing with like composers, and that's why classical music is super cool, is under the duress, for better or worse, of your bandmates. And so the novel is a very democratic and beautiful medium because it gives a sole individual, maybe a loner, someone who's misunderstood, who will never get an opportunity like that, a chance to share their vision with the world. And I am from Las Vegas, and I used to run a writers group in Las Vegas for years, and I would see strippers and old people and drug dealers and pimps and all these people who wanted to write a novel and wanted to be a writer and wanted to share their story. And I will tell you guys right now that 99% of them absolutely suck. And that's not just to be mean. I mean, just objectively, they didn't have a bone of talent in their body. And they also didn't have any desire to like work on the actual skill of writing and like objectively spend thousands of hours working on sentence structure and other skills to be good. And I noticed this as a teacher also. Most of my students have learned to read and write, but for some reason, a lot of them just aren't good at it. But in that writers group, there was this girl from Eastern Europe that would come in occasionally with these short stories that were nothing too crazy, nothing too literary, that would just absolutely floor you. The vibe and how she wrote would make you want to cry. And it was like, oh my God, how did you do this? And English wasn't her first language. She wasn't a genius back in Russia. She was literally a housekeeper in America, probably in her late 20s. And she had this gift and she had this vision and she had this kind of very unique take on the world. Like when we would sometimes like read a short story or read a poem and as homework and talk about it at the start of the meeting. And when she would talk about stuff, it would always be really different. It would be from this wild perspective. And it wasn't just because she was Russian. And I've noticed that with my students too. Last year I had this student who didn't think she was good at writing, and she would write the most insane stuff. Like better poetry, fiction, and nonfiction than most of the stuff I'm reading on Substack. And she had this crazy vision of reality, but she didn't care. I was like, dude, you could be great. Like, dude, like, no pressure, but if you ever want to pursue this, you can. And she doesn't care. She doesn't care about writing, doesn't care about reading. And there are people out there like that. But the way we are going to find those people is not to discourage others. It's going to be through the slog. It's going to be through all the drudgery of everyone posting their novel on Kindle and having 1 million crappy novels. That's what makes the modern market so interesting, that back, a couple decades ago, it was very hard to get published, but if you were good and you had some level of perseverance, you most likely could get published. Maybe not be a superstar, but at least get your work out there. But today, with over 4 million books being released every single year, and that number is just going to grow at an insane rate. I'm sure in a couple years that number will be over 10 million because of AI. That means it's getting harder for the one person to actually break through. And this is why actually I'm doing the work that I'm doing. This is why I actually care about, even though it's not like my favorite thing to talk about, like how to guarantee your growth, like in the writing world, how to actually grow an audience, how to grow them like one by one, because there are authors out there who are actually good, who actually have a voice and may not get noticed anymore by the publishing industry or just the general public. And it's really sad that we have lost that opportunity, lost that medium, lost that channel to be able to find and experience their work. And what makes it sad is that most of the time, the misunderstood Franz Kafka or Nietzsche or whoever is not the type of person who is willing to grow their audience one by one, how I lay out. And it's just kind of one of the modern travesties. And we can sit and cry about it, or we can be better, because it's easy to look back at the golden age of literature, because Don DeLillo wasn't unknown. Don DeLillo, if anyone out there has read his first novel, Americana, he was a copywriter. He was working at some New York City law firm, and he wrote this novel named Americana about this divorcee that goes on a trip across the United States. And I've read all of his novels, and that one is pretty good. I mean, it's a great first look on reality, and some of the writing on there, I mean, some of it's really brilliant. Beautiful critique of America and talking about love after love. But then I'm like, oh wait, Stephen King was working as a night janitor or as a teacher when he blew up. Cormac McCarthy was a random college student when he wrote The Orchard Keeper. When I look at Americana and The Orchard Keeper and Carrie, and many first-time novels, these guys weren't in MFA programs. These guys had said, I'm going to be a writer, trained for a couple of years or wrote for a couple of years, and then made it happen. But what's interesting about all these people, and I could go on, I'm looking at people behind me, David Mitchell with his novel Ghostwritten, Kashawisha Guru with A Pale View of the Hills. Each one of those novels, each one of those first novels was a very unique strike on a reality that we thought we knew. Kashawisha Guru in A Pale View of the Hills talks about this mother and daughter living in Nagasaki after the bomb goes off, a couple years after. And it's violent and it's wild. And it's kind of got this muted, unreliable quality that most post-war novels set in Japan didn't have. And Kasho Ishiguro, being an atheist, really focuses on life, really focuses on memory and are, the things and, the things we do to prevent ourselves from contemplating death. And like, that's who he was before, even though Kasho Ishiguro did get an MFA, so it's not a great example. But, he had this unique vision and saw it through. David Mitchell, in his first novel, Ghostwritten, like moves through all these weird first-person perspectives that are all connected but not connected. And he was inspired by Italo Calvino and all these other experimental persons. And now, now in retrospect, like, yeah, that guy was talented. That guy needed a voice. That guy needed to write. Cormac McCarthy was carrying the torch of Flannery O'Connor and Faulkner and said, I'm going to be the next one. I have this vision. I know what the next level is of Southern Gothic literature. And he believed in that. And so actually, when you look at many of these authors and when you hear many of them talk, when you hear Don DeLillo talk, something that I also advocate for is, what lineage are you actually in? What shoulders are you standing upon? Almost no one knows. Almost no one has any idea what they are doing. They just, people don't read enough. People don't understand that almost everyone stole and imitated with their first novel. And it was really just a remix of some other novel they really liked or some other author they really liked. And you have to do that. And every musician and everyone has to do that sometimes for years before they can really become unique. But all of us want to be unique. All of us don't want to do that work. All of us don't want to sit and imitate and steal and reread novels 10, 15, 20 times to understand what was actually going on in them. And so that's the perfect union. If you want to be this person, is that you need to have a unique vision of reality. You need to be a person who's lived a life. And then you need to multiply that by someone else's teachings and wisdom and vibe. And then you are going to get this beautiful third body. Because doing it all by yourself, doing it all alone, I almost disagree with Don DeLillo, is somewhat of a bad idea. Most likely, it's not going to work. Most likely, you're not going to get people interested in what you're doing, especially with all the books out there. And so, boom, there you guys have it. There is a little bit of right conscious wisdom on this idea that anyone can write. I think with training, I think with spending thousands of hours, anyone who is even untalented can become great. And then, of course, there are those superstars out there who just can do it from day one. There are people in every field. I tell the story about one of my friends in Nevada who started wrestling his senior year, everyone. And he was wrestling at 5A, the highest division in Nevada. And he took third place his first year of wrestling, which for anyone that knows, a lot of people start wrestling at age 5. But this guy had this crazy will to win. And he had a good cardio gas tank already from because he trained and other things. But he just willed his way to the top. There are people out there like that. And if they can get focused, they can do anything.